Hey everyone, so welcome to chapter one. And chapter one of the book really talks about the historical context of international studies. So with that, what we're talking about is we have to sort of look through the historical lens of the past to try to see how we got to be where we are today. Now that makes a lot of sense to a lot of people in some way. However, it's not as simple as that. Um, You'll find as we go through each of these lectures, one is I try to keep them short so that I don't bore you or myself all through this whole time, but also because I'm really trying to help you understand and want you to sort of think about the things that we think we know historically about how the world got to be where it is today. Um, and there are lots of causalities that we have historically looked at and analyzed to justify some of the things that have happened. So the chapter is titled The Past and the Present. And one of the things that it does is it sort of first allows us to look at various aspects of history, from the political side of history to the economic history. There are all different types of history that we look at and sort of analyze to arrive at conclusions that will hopefully propel us into the future. But there's also some dangers in this, right? And some of the dangers that happen in trying to go down this road is, what if the information you have is incorrect? So, for example, let's say what if John Wilkes Booth had not shot, wasn't the person who shot Abraham Lincoln, or if Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot John F. Kennedy? Uh, what would the world look like now if we found out that it was different or that the information was wrong? Uh, what if the Japanese didn't bomb Pearl Harbor? What if the Americans knew ahead of time that it was going to happen? What would that do to how we see the world around us? Um, and so, because of that, we have to sort of recognize that. And there's an old adage or saying that history is written by the victors. And this is really true because, the idea of the people who lose in battles, for example, don't really get to tell their story. The story is often told by those who win. And in so they can also dictate what that story is. And so frequently it's skewed much more heavily into the reality they want to perpetuate. And so this is how history is written. So we have to be able to more or less understand that context and then also be able to apply it going forward. So throughout the class, throughout this 8-week course, we'll be looking at it. And what we're doing now is building a foundation. So the earlier chapters really focus on those aspects. And in chapter one, particularly, we really start to look at a little bit about some of the common themes or beliefs that we may know about international philosophers or theories. And then we move into some other areas, but particularly, like, for example, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. What really led to its rise and collapse? Do we really have all the information that tells us the story? Or when we look at issues of, the rise of communism or the rise of socialism or the rise of Nazism, do we really understand the rationale as to why these things have actually taken place? And arguably, you could look at it in two different ways and say, well, yeah, it does explain, but it may not also explain everything. And so without the information, or without all the information, we have to make educated guess in terms of how we're going to proceed. Uh, so when you're trying to develop policies, it's very, and I've said this in many of my regular classes in poli-sci, I would say, you know, it's one thing to be able to look at the past and sort of build looking toward the future. But if you're going to develop policies in 2021, for example, based on outdated policies based on 1990s methodology, well, the world is very different today than it was in 1990. So the idea of thinking that you can utilize the exact same policies or ideas in the exact same way would be foolish. So this tells us that we may have to look at history with a little bit of trepidation and be able to sort of go from there and decide for ourselves what that future, what the history may really tell us, and also the tools of history. Like we have primary sources, those that were there during when the events took place, and sometimes we have sources that are not primary, where they've studied and researched, but they didn't live 2,000 years ago. So they can't tell us firsthand accounts, even though for a lot of the history that was written even 2,000 years ago, the primary sources may have been very good, but again, the information they're providing you can be incredibly subjective. So is it really true what they wrote about Julius Caesar? Is it true what Thucydides wrote, or is he writing from with a certain lens that through which he's making his assertions about the various issues that are going on during his time in history? And this can be said for any individual who's writing historical context, right? So I just want you to be able to be aware of that. And I think the first chapter sort of illustrates that and gives us some ideas of various types of historical contexts to be able to do that. So I think you'll find it interesting. And as I said, we'll be going through a chunk of this book, not all of it, because I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that we have a short time session for this class. So anyhow, that's it for chapter 1. And I will see you in chapter 2. Okay.